the biggest thing for me is to make sure that the technology that are rolled out are actually rolled out once and provide long-term future. Without having to top up and come back and reinvest every single time. And that's the beauty of fiber. You lay the fiber in the ground, and then by changing the electronics at both ends, you can continue to support that growth in data demand.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and today a very special guest, JB Rousselot. How are you?
Very good, very good. Kia ora. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on the show. Well, you're the Chief Executive at Chorus New Zealand, responsible really for the largest part of New Zealand's fibre broadband infrastructure, and I guess there's a bit more than that, but that's probably what most people appreciate most about Chorus. We've hit, I guess, this milestone coming to the end of 2022 of the end of the UFB2 rollout, or the second stage of the ultra-fast broadband rollout here in New Zealand, which has culminated in, I think it's 87% of the population having the option of putting fibre broadband into their homes. So quite an exciting milestone. I thought, good time to sit down and hear a little bit more about what's happening in the world of Chorus, where we're at in New Zealand, sort of comparatively on the global stage, and maybe a little bit about the future, because I'm always interested in hearing about the future. So thanks for joining us. Before we kick in, a big thank you to our show partners, to Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology and Deal for their support of the New Zealand Tech Podcast and the broader tech and innovation ecosystems within New Zealand. Well, JB, this big milestone. It's been 11 years of work, I think, for Chorus. When Crown Infrastructure or Crown Fibre Partners, as they were then, and full disclosure, I do some work with Crown Infrastructure. When they went out to the market, and this was before you were in New Zealand, Chorus won a pretty large chunk of that opportunity to partner with the government on that private-public partnership to put out to roll out fibre in New Zealand. What's your view on how that's played out, and how does it feel to sort of reach this milestone?
I think in terms of public partnership projects, this would have to be one of the most successful that I've heard about, because it's over 10 years, as you said. It's multi-billion dollar. There's probably about $5 to $6 billion that have gone into this. About 1.6 of that came from the government in the form of a loan that will be repaid. But it's a project of that scale that was delivered on time and on budget. And you don't have many of those big publicly funded PPP projects that are of that scale that are delivered on time and on budget. And to put a couple of numbers in there, there's over 400 towns in New Zealand that have now access to fibre, going from, of course, the big cities, Auckland, etc., but all the way to places like, Fox Glacier, Haast, much smaller communities in New Zealand. There's been about, I think it's about 44 million hours of work has been done to actually install that fibre in the ground and make it available to people. And as you said, it's now 87% of the population that can access the fibre network. And what's interesting is we now have over 71% of them have actually placed an order. So on the one hand, it's a great number. In fact, it's bigger on the older part of the network. So the UFB1, which was done in the earlier years, that's already at 75% take-up rate. Auckland is at 80%. It continues to grow 1% per quarter. My surprise coming from Australia is how come there's still 30% that haven't ordered one. So if I can put a plug to all the listeners today, if you don't have fibre yet, then place your order.
Yeah, I think you'll find that our listeners for New Zealand Tech Podcast are there and have been for some time, and long-time listeners will may recall that at the very beginning of the rollout, I chose to move and rented a property that was in one of the
was
very
in the
few
fibre footprint,
areas where you could get access to fibre. So certainly quite a big deal for New Zealand as a whole. And for some of us, an incredibly exciting thing to be a part of. Now, before joining Chorus, you were based in Australia. Tell us a little bit about that role, and I guess the differences in terms of what's happened here, compared to Australia. And you had quite a pivotal role there for a number of years. So share a little bit about that.
The white hair show that I've been in the industry for about now more than 20 years, and then 6 years before I came here was with NBN, which is basically the equivalent of Chorus in Australia. And for political, historical reason, it went a slightly different path. And if I look at the great success that's been delivered here, I put it down to three key things when I compare it to Australia. The first one is that when the structural separation of Spark was done, the assets went into the right place. So things like the pipes that are in the street, the pits where you can put some equipment, the exchange, all of that went across to Chorus. And so when you're asked to roll out a new fiber network, doing it in your own assets, in your own pits, in your own pipes, in your own exchange, is a lot easier. In Australia, the situation is different. NBN was set up separately. The equivalent of Spark, Telstra, continued to own the pits, the pipes, and the exchange. And so NBN has the task of rolling out that new network in somebody else's assets. And that makes it a lot harder. It's the equivalent of doing a reno when you own the house versus when you actually have to negotiate with your landlord about what you can do. So that's one big difference. The second one is that in New Zealand, it has been a bipartisan project. So it was started by the previous government, but when the new government came in place, they were fully supportive. It continued the same way. In Australia, it became more of a political battlefield, and so there were big changes that were triggered every single time there was a change in government. And so that made it a lot harder. And then the last one, interestingly, is that in the early days of Chorus, there was a decision made for a while on the copper pricing by the Commerce Commission that really put a huge amount of stress on the company because it was a quite harsh decision that ended up being turned back. And so Chorus has always been super focused on delivering things very cost effectively. And so you put those three elements together and you get to a project that's been delivered on time, on budget, and now covers fiber to the home to 87% of the country. Australia will get there. They're starting to now upgrade their network to get to fiber to the home. But that's, for me, the reason why it's been different.
Yeah, that's. I think some good observations there, and of course, got a different ownership model, right? With the National Broadband Network in Australia,
is state-owned.
That sits with the state rather than with private enterprise, and we do for all sorts of reasons often end up with very different results from things that when a government effectively is trying to run a business versus those things being run privately.
And as I said, about 2/3 of the funding for the UFB came from private sector. There's a lot of money that came from the government, but 2/3 came from the private sector, and that's something that could not happen over there.
How important do you think that funding was that came in? Was it just the funding? What were the key things from your knowledge anyway in terms of, I guess Chorus was kind of forced to move, weren't they? Because otherwise Chorus wouldn't have had much of a future. But the approach, we ended up with Chorus, but also 3 local fibre companies. Or was it 4?
Three more, three plus Chorus.
Yeah, that's right. That created sort of quite a competitive playing field, didn't it?
It did, and I think when you said what was the role of the government, was it just the money? If you think about 10 years ago, the average data consumption of somebody on the internet was about 10 gigabytes per month. And so the idea of building a network of this scale that allows what we consume today, which is now 500 gigabytes per month, is kind of the average consumption of customers. The question mark back then, I've been told because I wasn't around, but are we building a white elephant? Are we over-investing? As it turned out, we didn't, but that was a bold movement from the government, from Crown Infrastructure Partners to go and say, yeah, we're going to back this program. Originally, the business case said that by 2020, 2022, the take-up would be around 21%. And as I said, we're now 75, 80% for Auckland. So that was the bold move that the government made. And you needed that type of commitment from the government to actually kick in the private funding that came along and did that.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I guess it's what I'd put in the category of futurist thinking.
Yep.
The government end within, the approach sort of across the board from all the key players and, those who were involved. I mean, got it incredibly right, particularly when we look at some of the other challenges that have maybe happened in Australia or other parts of the world without denigrating your work and the work of those working for NBN, because the political pieces,
Makes it a lot harder.
were probably the biggest pieces, and I'm sure other people will have some other thoughts and opinions. I've probably mostly watched that from a distance, and we'll leave it at that. So, looking at Chorus today, what are the things you would say that a lot of people probably don't know about Chorus and what you actually get up to? Because fibre, that's exciting, and it's meant through the pandemic that we've had a very strong ability for most organisations that have got work that fits for working from home to be able to do so with a relative ease. And when we compare that to some of the experiences, and whether it's Australia or varying other places, I think we'd say New Zealand, a lot better off. But what are the other things you get up to?
A couple of little interesting tidbit from a Chorus perspective. So first of all, the network, because that's the core asset that we've got. I've mentioned already that there's been a lot of mahi that's gone into it, 44 million hours to build that network, but. Some of it is in intrinsic places. We've got an undersea cable, for example, that goes from here to Waiheke because there was demand there that justify having that being in place. When we roll out the network in a geographically challenging environment that New Zealand can be, there's time where we had to have a helicopter draw a fiber network across a big gully. I recently visited the project that we have in Milford Sound, because fiber will get to Milford Sound as part of the UFB2 program. And that's a challenging road to go up to, go through a tunnel, go back down. So our fiber goes through some pretty interesting areas. And it's also quite resilient. Recently, there were some big weather events in the South Island that washed off, bridges, roads, etc. And I've got a couple of interesting pictures where the bridge is gone, but the blue cable is still there, and it's still working. There are cases where sometimes, unfortunately, it gets broken, but in that case, it's still working. And there's another picture of it actually holding a huge boulder, but that fiber is still working again.
Okay.
So it is a quite resilient network, and it is quite big. The other thing is that people may not know is the fact that we're wholesale only. So you see advertising in TV that says, Chorus, fiber is the way that people should do internet today. But at the end of the day, we don't sell our product to end users. We've got 100 retail service providers that basically access our network on a totally equal basis. So if you're a small startup RSP, retail service provider, or if you're some of the biggest established one, we make that network available to everybody on exactly the same term. And that's probably another good thing of the model that was adopted here, is that open wholesale access to that network. So sometimes people are a bit confused. They go, no, I want to buy my service from Chorus. You buy it, but indirectly. And what you see us in advertising on TV, on media, etc., is to explain to people, hey, fiber is here, you should take it. So it's to get those last 30% that haven't yet placed the order. Another one probably is, the fact that we do have a lot of visibility of what's happening on the network. And, data consumption keeps growing. It grows by about 20 to 23% every year. But we track it, minute by minute. And so we know exactly when the peak is. The peak is in the evening at about 8 p.m. when people are back home. They're streaming video and things like this, or they're playing games online or doing streaming with Zooming with their families. So we track that. We were able to track that during the pandemic and the lockdown periods. And we had a lot of conversations with the entire industry, with MB, with the Ministry of Telecommunication, to make sure that the network would cope with this. And so the first few days, people were wondering, is it going to work? And it did. And so being able to track this is also a really interesting thing. What we saw with the pandemic is the amount of download, went up because people couldn't go out. But what really went up was the amount of upload. So, the connection in your home can go both ways. You can be streaming videos, etc., or you can actually be sending some content. And that's the thing that went really dramatically up during the lockdown, and interestingly has stayed up.
Right, because there's a lot of video calls, right?
Yeah,
which
exactly.
means that you're streaming video in reverse.
Yeah. So people now use those video streaming to connect with family. And then what we're seeing now is, most workplaces have come down to a hybrid type of working, where some people will do 1 or 2 or 3 days a week working from home. When they're working from home, they're on a Zoom call, they're on a Teams call, and so a lot of our traffic is now going that way, rather than coming into your home. So that's another interesting one. If I can pick 2 more, one is in terms of the environmental footprint. The great thing we've got is this fiber technology is one that uses a lot less power than other technologies to provide broadband. So the more people are on fiber, the less emissions we've got in our network, because the last bits of power consumed is in the exchange or in your home. In between, there is absolutely no power, which is not the case for other technologies. So,
not that the other technologies use huge amounts of power, though, to be fair.
It's interesting because as speed goes up, then you see that really going up. Because as speed goes up, some of the other technology needs to put more technology, more capacity in the ground. That part of the network for us remains the same. And so we've done some research recently that really showed one of the benefits of a fiber connection is that as you go up in speed, 1 gig, potentially 2, 3, or 4, that consumption remains relatively flat, which is not the case with some of the other technology. And then the last thing I think that people may not know is the fact that we operate under a regulated model. So we have a relationship with the Commerce Commission, and they are the one who decide how much money we can make on that network that's been built. So there's a lot of control that's in place. We have a rich relationship with the Commerce Commission, and sometimes we see things slightly differently. But overall, it's a model that really is delivering for New Zealanders and for New Zealanders' homes and businesses.
Oh, thanks for that. Now, the resiliency of the network, you mentioned that. Always in order to deliver the most resiliency, you want sort of multiple paths to get to different locations, so that if a bit of fibre gets damaged,
it still works,
and so on. How much work is really still going on that basis? Because the more we start relying on fibre, the more that we kind of need to know that we've got that increased resilience, and we've seen it into New Zealand. And in the earlier years of New Zealand Tech Podcast, we would get excited about discussions that maybe there's going to be somebody else providing a fibre connection to New Zealand rather than just the Southern Cross cables. And of course, in recent years, we've ended up with a really increased resiliency from that international perspective. But can you fill us in on what's happening sort of network wise there?
Yeah, no, Crown Investor Partner, set the standard and actually did say, that for above a certain size, we absolutely needed to provide that dual path. So if one cable gets cut, the network still works. So we have that dual path on the vast majority of our customers. So the vast majority of our customers are on it. And then there was an allowance to go and say, well, it might be hard to do on smaller communities. we do have a budget every year that we actually continue to build to make sure that we create these double path. So we are above the standard that was created by Crown Investment Partner, and every year we continue to invest in that. And a good recent example is the loop that we're building on the west coast of the South Island. So going down the south coast, going up Hast Pass, down to Wanaka, and that has created a completely different path to the other one that was on the east coast of the South Island. So there's ongoing investment to make sure that more and more of our network has that dual path. Because as you say, people are now totally reliant on it. And if I'm working from home and the internet stops working, then it's not good.
Yeah, I mean that area that you mentioned, pass and so on. I know Crown Infrastructure have been involved there. Also, the mobile black spots and so on. And I think as more time goes on, the actual importance of having very resilient networks just increases, right? Because I think we sort of get to a point where there's not too much infrastructure that doesn't rely on some sort of connectivity. And if you whether it's that you have an accident on the road out there, or you've got a business, or you're trying to work from home, then we don't want to see that connectivity
absolutely
broken.
And that South Island West Coast connection is a perfect example on that. As we built that fiber down, it lit up a number of communities with fiber, so we were able to roll out fiber. But it also lit up a number of mobile towers to reduce the black spot. And when I visited the site that goes to Milford Sound, the biggest positive feedback I got was a bus driver who does tourist ferrying back and forth between Queenstown and Milford Sound. And he was saying the number of accidents that I saw, that I had to then drive another 20 minutes before I could report. And he goes, I think there are 4 or 5 towers that are going to be let up down that road because fiber has been rolled out. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. You put fiber down, you can lit up towns, you can lit up areas that were in black spot and contribute to a great outcome.
Great. Now, looking at the other side, so looking to the infrastructure that that Chorus now owns, that is over 100, well over 100 years since the earliest stages of it, I suppose, in terms of the copper network. Mm-hmm. What does that look like to maintain it? Can you remember when that started in New Zealand? It's not a number that's sticking in my mind.
I don't know when was the first. I don't know when was the first copper line laid, but it's a technology that has served us really well. I'm old enough to remember the days of dial-up internet, where you had to actually make sure you were the only person on the line to be able to be on the internet. So the future of copper on the areas where we have fiber. Clearly, we've got a better network now, and so the story is to actually make sure that we migrate everybody to that newer technology, so that we can ultimately turn off the copper network. And we've started doing that. There is now a code that we've agreed with the Commerce Commission, also with the retail service providers, that allows us in areas where we have fiber to go and say, hey, the last few customers, you need to migrate because we're going to turn off the copper network. So we've already turned off, I think, over 200 cabinets, and there is in excess of 17,000 people that have been said, hey, you need to move to the new technology because we're going to turn off this network. And we'll also, as of the beginning of next week, we'll stop selling a new copper line in those areas where fiber is already there, because we're saying, hey, there is a better technology. Why don't you use it? So that's the
where that fiber is Chorus fiber, presumably.
Yes, but probably also in the other areas, because there isn't really, if it's the local fiber companies, the technology is there. You might as well get people on the right technology.
So it's not really cost effective for you to continue maintaining that in those locations too.
We still make money on the copper lines that we have in the other fiber companies, but do we really want to go and install a new line in an area where ultimately there is a better technology? I don't know. we'll have to see.
Okay, interesting.
But then for me, the conversation is around the 13% that do not have access to fiber, because there the technologies are copper, or then you go fixed wireless, internet service providers, or now the next generation of satellite provision. And so I think it's really important that this country starts that conversation. I was in Europe recently. People look at the New Zealand model and they are very impressed by how it's been played so far. They are really impressed in particular by the take-up rates that we achieve on the network. But while they were really impressed by the 87% coverage a couple of years ago, now you hear other countries are now targeting well into the 90s, some of them 95. Ireland and Spain are going 98, 99% of the country will have access to fiber. And it's because they recognize that, at the end of the day, if you live in rural and regional New Zealand, you need access to great broadband just as much as you do in the city. In some cases, you need it better, or even more, because you probably need to do telehealth more than somebody who lives in the city. And so that conversation, I think, needs to take place now in New Zealand. What do we do with the 13%? Can we push fiber coverage more out? Can satellite play a role for the most rural, extreme, remote areas? And then how do we do the in-between? Because fiber won't go to 99%. It's not cost efficient. But having this look at how do you progressively make reliable, long-term, future-proof broadband accessible to that fringe of New Zealand that is not yet on fiber, I think is an important conversation to be had.
Yeah. I think there's definitely going to be interest in that, and I often have conversations with people that are on those fringes. They might be 100 metres from fibre access, and there's definitely that frustration. Just going back to when the copper line started in New Zealand, Google tells me Alexander Graham Bell first demonstrated the telephone to Queen Victoria in 1878, and they formed the Telephone Company Limited in the UK to market Bell's phones in Britain at that time. It looks like New Zealand was a very, very close follower. They had electrical transmission of sound in that same year, 1878, and then 1881, New Zealand had its first telephone exchange in Christchurch. So
that's really impressive.
There's quite a history there.
But yeah, and what's interesting for me is that if you think about it, at some point, governments around the world and in New Zealand too kind of went, every home should have a phone line, and there was by then it was typically state-owned telecommunications businesses that were there, but they were given the mandate are actually rolling out that network everywhere. And, it is really much everywhere in New Zealand. And so that same conversation now needs to take place with the next generation of technology.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I had somebody give me that exact argument when I was talking to them and saying, look, it must be very, very expensive to get fibre to that remaining 13%. Yeah, that surely doesn't make any sense. And the comment that came back was, well, New Zealand did it with copper,
absolutely,
back in the day. Why should those of us who are in that remaining 13% sort of be treated any differently than
absolutely. And
everyone else. So I guess that's probably lines up with your thinking.
And we're ready for that conversation. We really want, because I think it takes another round of government, industry, investors conversation to go and find a way find that Goldilocks of how do you continue to grow the coverage. And as you say, some of it is 100 meters away from our network. So those are relatively reasonable costs to expand. But then the further out you go, of course, the cost per premises goes up. But, if you're in rural and remote New Zealand, you do have the same needs. And in some cases, as I said, you have bigger needs for a fast, reliable broadband than people in the cities.
We've certainly got the best connectivity we've ever had as a country, but I can imagine that will be an ongoing topic. And I guess there's an election not too far out, so maybe that ends up being one of those things that is a topic for some amongst all sorts of other demands that we have as a country. Can you give us any indication? I'm sure this is something that you've probably got more insight on than anyone else. To reach that remaining 13%, if we were to go to, I don't know, 99%, say, or 100%, how much more does that last bit cost, comparatively, than the work that's been done to date, right? Because there must be a pretty interesting curve there in terms of the cost differences.
It's very much a hockey stick or exponential curve. What we've said, and we've actually said it publicly, is that we're keen to actually go from 87 to 90%, and that we would be able to fund it if we've got the right regulatory and the right policy settings. So we're happy to contribute some of our funding to actually get to that 90%. 90 to 95 is probably feasible, but we'll need significant amount of government funding, because commercially you get to the bit that gets hard to make sense commercially. And you're probably talking, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, to get to that 95. 95 to 99, you're really getting to the very, very expensive.
That's where the hockey
exactly.
Hockey stick is.
So if you ask me, my gut feel, and it's not a fully backed up data gut feel, but I think 95 is a realistic target. Beyond that, you have to really start asking yourself the questions about, are there better alternatives to provide long-term connectivity? The biggest thing for me is to make sure that the technology that are rolled out are actually rolled out once and provide long-term future without having to top up and come back and reinvest every single time. And that's the beauty of fiber. You lay the fiber in the ground, and then by changing the electronics at both ends, you can continue to support that growth in data demand.
So talking about that aspect of fibre, because I think that is one of the most exciting things, is you put fibre in there, and then the technology that gets attached at each end, as it were, can change and improve over time. And we've seen that with the ultra-fast broadband rollout. When we started, I think the base offering was a 30 megabits down, 10 megabits up. And at the time, that was a step up for the very large majority of New Zealand, and even compared to Australia, where I think they were probably DSL 1 or probably DSL 2 at that stage. But New Zealand had a fair chunk of VDSL coming in at that time, so there was a bit of compete there. But what was the top end? Maybe 200 megabits at the time. Now gigabit has what sort of a percentage of the connections? The gigabit service about 4 or 5 years ago, we would have had 1,000 customers. Now it's almost 25% of our customers, and we're getting close to 1 million. So we've got in excess of 200,000 customers that are on the 1 gigabit service. And then the big thing that we did in December last year, pretty much a year ago exactly to the date, is we took all the customers that were on the 120 plan and upgraded them to 300, 100. And that 100 was recognizing the fact that there is a lot more upload that takes place on the network. And that's something that we did together with all of the other local fiber companies. So basically all of the wholesale offering in New Zealand went, hey, let's take everybody that's on 100 and put them on 300. And that was supported by all of the retail service provider who passed on that additional speed at no extra cost to the customer. So, when you talk about the beauty of fiber, that was something that required nothing. The network could do it. There was a bit of adjustment that needed to be made at the interconnect, so where the points of our network connect with other people's network. So that had to be resized. But otherwise, that was something that was able to be implemented at no extra cost. When you get to the hyperfiber services, the 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig, it's a different technology. So then you need... But the same fiber.
But exactly, the same fiber. So you need a different box in the home, you need a different card in the exchange, but it's down the exact same fiber. And so the investment is limited to those two pieces of electronics. And you just push different lights, different signals through it. And then recently in our lab, we did a test where we did 25 gig. And the way we were displaying it is you saw the coil of fiber that was there, and it was about, I can remember, 4 or 5 kilometers of fiber. We had the normal 100 meg or 1 gig service going through. We had a 4 gigabit hyperfiber service going through, and then on top of it, we lit up that 25 gig service. So that's the beauty of that asset. And you were mentioning the Southern Cross, the cable network that goes under the Pacific Ocean to link New Zealand to the US. They've been able to do the same thing. Over the year, they've been able to just shove a lot more data in that same pipe. And then you said other pipes were built, and that's how you get a lot of more capacity. But that's the beauty of that technology.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. So, and there are more. There's more of a future even than that. What's referred to as 25 GPON delivering the 25 gigabits. There's 50 sort of next, and that will keep coming, won't it? Because we see with the undersea cables, those are running at blinding speeds because you've only got you don't have that many fiber strands that actually connect New Zealand to the rest of the world. So there really is a near unlimited sort of capacity in terms of the fiber that runs from one premise to another, right?
And as you say, what fuels this is the demand. And what's important to understand with the internet is it's not a flat demand. It basically goes into peaks and troughs. Our biggest peak of data consumption, I think, was 4.3 terabytes because that was our peak hour time. And on top of that, one of the big game platform released their new update. And they do that at the peak hour time for us in New Zealand because they do it at the same time globally. And so when you look at, what do you need in your home, on a stable basis, you probably don't need a hyperfiber product. But the moment that game gets released and your teenage kids wants to download it because they're desperate to load it, and at the same time you're on a video conference because you're working from, that's the time where you go, suddenly the peak is there, and therefore you do need that burst capacity, and that's what drives people going from 100 to 300, then to 1 gig, then to hyperfiber, and that will continue because more and more of the things we do is going online. We are going to store more things online. My son is traveling right now. I think he's taken 37,000 pictures. They're going to have to be somewhere in the cloud, and at some point he's going to press a button to upload them. So it's that type of burst that requires it. And then if you're a business, then it's a completely different story. If you're a business, all of your communications are online. Your ordering is online. Your customer support is online. When you place a call on a call center, it is now going through an online platform. So, businesses will also have increasing needs in terms of speeds, and that's why we think that demand will continue to grow. Today, we already have, I think it's 17% of our customers consume 1 terabyte of data per month. We think that will be the average in 2025. And the more data you consume, the more speed you need to actually get that data to come through.
Yeah, look, and I'm a big proponent of getting a higher speed when it comes to your connectivity, and that what you talked about in terms of you've got those peaks and troughs, but nobody wants to be in that situation where your business productivity is impacted, or you're wasting a lot of time at home because you don't have the right sort of connectivity. And I guess I think of it a little bit like power, right? We most of us in New Zealand would have more power running to our home than we need, all at once. But we would get pretty frustrated if you couldn't, I don't know, do a washing load and turn your oven on,
at the same
run
time.
the dryer
at
the same time, and so on, right? Or for those things to take two times as long or 3 times as long.
It's a great analogy.
There's not enough power running into the home. And I think we've been very fortunate in most cases for those of us that are, say, moving to electric vehicles, that we've got a sufficient capacity to be able to charge vehicles overnight and not, have a brownout or a blackout in our homes because we've chosen
you're charging the car.
charge a
Absolutely.
vehicle. Although there probably are some other discussions, and that's down the power track. So probably not an area that you need to lose sleep over. But there's some other discussions there around what we do from a power perspective. But I see that the impact that it can have on on productivity, or even if you've got whether it's your GoPro or whatever your gadget is, and you want to upload those things to the cloud, being on a connection that's, say, your base speed versus even your gigabit, right? It might be the difference between your upload taking 1 hour and taking 3 hours, and actually you want to upload everything off your your device and then skedaddle off and do something else, but you're stuck there uploading. That's not helpful. And I think more and more we rely on moving things to the cloud, not just to a local device and so on.
Well, what's interesting is what's now becoming increasingly more apparent, and especially when we did the upgrade from 100 to 300. Is that people also need to think about the in-home experience. So it's great to have a super fast pipe arriving into your home, and we deliver this, and our network is never congested. So you reliably are going to get that speed coming into your home. But if that device is connected to a modem or a Wi-Fi modem that is not of the latest technology, then suddenly the bottleneck becomes how you consume that data in your home. And we often say to people, if you want to connect a TV, it's better if you're connected with a wire. But so many of our devices are connected through Wi-Fi, and I think we're starting to have a good conversation with the industry, because the retail service providers need to play a role there on how do we make sure that in-home experience is not the bottleneck that defines the experience that you're going to have in your home. And I think you're going to see a lot more happening. Wi-Fi 6 as a new technology is definitely improving. I upgraded recently from a Wi-Fi 5 mesh network to Wi-Fi 6 in my home, and it was just really impressive to see the difference. And it was visible. You actually measure it in the speed it takes to download an episode to your tablet as you're about to go and take a plane. It's measurable about how quickly a stream of video will start. So you actually physically see it. So I think a lot of people need to pay attention about the home environment and how that part of the network that gets to your device works.
I would love to see more media coverage on that, whether it's through I don't know who picks that up exactly, but it is a common thing that I'll hear from people all over the country who'll say, "Oh, Paul, I've got a terrible internet connection. I need to go with satellite, or I need to do this or that." And often there's quite some confusion around where those issues are. Or they'll tell me, "Look, I'm on fibre, but it's really slow," right? And of course, fibre's not the issue. So there is definitely some work to do on that front. Better Wi-Fi certainly helps, but as you say, if you want the fastest, most robust connection, then having a cable back to the router is I guess the gold standard in the same way that fibre versus any other option. It's the gold standard.
Just on this one, if I can, it was interesting in Europe. Some of the vendors there, and vendors always kind of want to take you 5 to 10 years out because they're trying to sell you some equipment. But some of them were starting to talk about fiber to the room. So they were going, it's good enough to have fiber to your home, but actually maybe you should have the fiber go all the way to specific rooms in your home. So I don't think we're there tomorrow, but eventually we might get to that. So the cable may not be a Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable. It might actually become a real fiber that will go all the way to your TV.
Yeah. Now we do obviously have other connectivity options in New Zealand other than just fibre and other than just Chorus. How do you expect that sort of compete to look like over the years ahead? Because there are a lot of people that are on a rural broadband connection that might be over 4G, 5G, and in the cities too. There's a lot of that. We've got Starlink. We're seeing more competition, and I haven't seen any direct stats on it, but certainly the feedback I get is a lot of people are very, very happy with that type of connectivity. And sure, they might have to work around how they deal with some of those, some of those peaks. But sometimes it's just a single person in a dwelling, and they're very happy with those options, and the offerings from our telcos can be very competitive. So you've got that pressure, I suppose, of wanting to return as much as possible back to shareholders and to be able to invest back into the network. But you've got some competition that sort of keeps you honest there, right?
And listen, let's start with the latest satellite offerings, the low orbit satellite proposal, and the way we look at them is, in fact, this is part of delivering the right service to rural and very remote areas in New Zealand. We're never going to be able to justify a fiber connection to some very remote areas in New Zealand. Right now, we probably have a copper line, and on a good day, they will be getting 6 megabits per second because it's a very long copper line, and therefore the speed degrades. Of course, they should
less
move
in some cases, right?
Absolutely, and they should move to that technology. We're never going to compete with them. Absolutely, customers should move to that technology. Fixed wireless is a different story because it covers some of those areas where we don't reach with fiber, but it also covers area where fiber is here. We back our product. We back the quality of fiber. We think fiber, gives you that reliable speed, reliable latency, which are important for end users. There will be a room, as you say. Some customers will be satisfied with a fixed wireless product, and as long as they are a reasonable usage customer, then it might work for them. They might have to be a bit more patient on some of the burst stories, and if they have a big household with multiple users and want to be able to work from home, then they can give it a go. They can have a look, and hopefully they'll realize that fiber is better for them. We're still seeing growth in that fiber uptake. So as people exit copper technology, they've got choices of technology, as you say. We still see the majority of them pick fiber. We still see the uptake of fiber grow at about 1% per quarter. So I was mentioning Auckland was already at 80%, and it's been growing pretty reliably 1% per quarter in that uptake. Fixed wireless uptake is growing too, but those two technology can cohabitate. Some customers will be happy with a fixed wireless connection, others won't. Our case is, if you look at the speed performance, and the Commerce Commission has done a very good job in kind of now providing transparency so that customers know what they're getting. The bulk of the fixed wireless offering today is still a 4G offering, and if you look at the Comcom report, the average speed is about 26 megabits per second. So if you're on fiber, you're getting a better speed outcome. They're going to start to monitor the 5G performance. Right now, there's a lot of spare capacity on that 5G network. So I expect that the numbers will look good. But as more and more people potentially opt for that, but at the same time, as more and more people use mobile phones that are going to use that capacity, at some point, the mobile operators will have to go and say, where is my best return? Is it on selecting, allocating that capacity to fixed wireless application, or is it to allocate it to mobile applications? And my expectation is increasingly we build mobile application. And so what we're likely to see is a really attractive potential performance on 5G. It would still be, I think, comparative to what we offer with our 300 megabits per second product. But then as that capacity get used primarily by mobility application, because that's what it should be, it's a mobile network, then I think people will realize that it's a better thing to come back to fiber. And it's hard to do the type of data increase that we're seeing, 25% per annum, to keep up with it at scale. So I think it will remain a reasonable part of the market, but not something that will ultimately put a massive threat to our business.
Yeah, I can't see fibre going away at all. So I think you're in a good place there. But I guess there's some interesting dynamics in terms of pricing and what the lower speed offerings are and so on. That
and this is why
deliver.
we introduced the Fibre Starter product, which is one where we've reduced significantly the cost that we charge the retail service providers. But we've said we'll make that available to you if you retail it for less than $60 per month. So we do want fiber to also be in that space of people that are either cost conscious or are low end users, because it's a 50 megabits per second service. We do want fiber to also be a possibility for that segment of the market, and we're seeing that product starting to take up some pretty good momentum.
Right, which sort of brings me to my next question, which is, how do you think as a country we address what gets referred to as the digital divide, and those homes that maybe are going to struggle to pay commercial rates for broadband? We have these discussions around, broadband now should be a human right, or is considered a human right by many. So what do you think are the appropriate ways to address these sorts of challenges?
So I'd say the first thing is for the industry to actually create a commercially viable product that will be able to attract some of those some of that market. And we've done that with the Fibre Starter, and you'll have other offerings that are in place for on other technology. So that's the thing that the industry can do by itself. Then typically we all have a program to help with the digital divide. So we might be actually supporting charities or associations that are trying to bridge some of that gap. But then ultimately there's also a role for government to play. And this happened during COVID with the Department of Education that created a program so that we all made access to high-speed broadband to people that could not afford it, so that their kids can continue to study during the lockdown periods. And the industry got behind it and really supported it. So there is an element that needs to take place there. And it's important not just because of the funding, but also because of the channel to those communities. When you think about a school, if you're not working with the school, saying, you can get it for free does not deliver the right result. You need to make sure that the device is also in the home, that they know how to use it, etc. And so there is a need for the industry to provide a good entry-level price. That's the first step. And then there is a need to work across the industry and with the associations that are looking after the most unfavored parts of our communities, so that they can, as you say, ultimately have access to decent connectivity.
Now, just jumping back to the copper, just so I make sure we're clear there. You are not taking copper out except where there is fibre to a home, or to a premise.
To be very clear, the only places where we're removing copper are places where we have fibre. And when we did the trials that we did last year, we actually started with the ones that had a really high take-up rate already. So, just a few customers left on the copper network. We're ramping up this program, and in fact, some of the retail service providers are very supportive of it. They also have their own program of trying to exit that product in fiber area. So, there's a better technology that's there. Clearly, we need to move to it, and I think the industry is now quite supportive of that move. But let's be very clear, it's only happening where fiber is already installed.
Right. And then you've also got aspects where those that have got a copper phone line, those are getting turned off. The old PSTN, is it public switch telephone network? I can't remember these old terms. But,
or plain old telephone.
Plain old telephone system, so that stuff's getting turned off. So there's probably sort of two directions where consumers might get communications. How far in advance should they be getting warnings? And because I just sometimes get past communications that I can see there are consumers maybe getting confused with the messaging that comes to them, and I'm picking that as Chorus, you're not directly doing a lot of communications to end customers. It's often their retail service provider, their internet provider that's providing those communications.
So you're right that there are two things happening in parallel. One is Chorus progressively turning off the copper network, and that is regulated by a code that the Commerce Commission has put in place. So to answer your question, it says you need to provide at least 6 months notice to customers. And so we work very closely with the retail service providers because, as you said, they are the one that have the relationship with the customer. But because it's something that we trigger, we also in that scenario do communicate with the customer. So customers will receive a letter from Chorus that says, we are about to turn off. You need to talk to your retail service providers. And in parallel, we've made sure that the retail service providers does that. So I think that program works well. We've done, as I said, already 200 cabinets have been turned off. And the majority of it has happened really well. I think there's been not even a handful of complaints that have come through, and we're making sure that we learn from them so that they don't happen in the broader program. And then in parallel, you've got retail service providers deciding to not offer copper services, and some of it might be that PSTN, so plain, the switch technology network for voice communication. Recently, the good news is that as an industry, the retail service providers have agreed to an industry code on how we communicate to customers, how long they're going to provide, the notice they'll provide to customers. So I think hopefully the message will get clearer, there'll be less confusion, but it's true that there's going to be those two programs operating in parallel, and it's likely that it's not going to be tricky, which is why we're really engaging very hard with the retail service providers to make sure that it's not too confusing for end users.
Yeah, I think that there's always going to be a level of discomfort when a change is forced, and although probably a very large percentage of the population have walked away from having fixed landline phones in a home, and often business premises too. There are some where that's still their go-to, and there's no desire to change, but that's coming, that's happening, and I guess it's just something that we all have to get used to.
And the good news is the industry is quite well structured, and particularly the retail service providers, in identifying customers that have special needs, so people that need a medical alarm and things like this. They have that information. There is also a code now to make sure that those systems will continue to work. There is a code to ensure that access to 111 continues to happen. So, we've put a lot of protections around it, but it's something that we all, whether we're the wholesalers or the retailers, paying a lot of attention.
That's great. Anything else you can share around, what's next? What's ahead for Chorus? Whether it's things that are not too far out, or maybe what the possibilities might be, sort of a decade from now.
Well, what's interesting for us, as I said, is having that conversation about how much further do we push fiber. We think that's really an exciting area to go through, and then there is the fact that there are new areas that we can develop. So one of the things that we look at is we have exchanges. In those exchanges, we've got plenty of space that's taken by that copper technology. As we turn off copper, we're going to be able to remove that kit, and we're going to end up with rack space. So cabinets basically that are connected to power, that have air conditioning, great backhaul connectivity, and are at the edge of our fiber network. There is an emerging business need which is called edge computing. So people hear about the big data centers that are being built by the big global players. A lot of that compute capability is going to go there, but there are specific applications that need that compute to be a lot closer to the end user. So we believe that that's an opportunity for us to grow. So that's an exciting area for us to look at. And we want to make sure that we actually leverage that asset that we have to look at those types of new opportunities. So, the way we look at it is this is a bit of a milestone for us. As you said, we've finished or almost finished, a few days away from finishing the build. I'm going to Opononi next week to celebrate that. But that was a phase of the history of Chorus. There is also a phase which is the first big migration from copper to fiber. That will still take probably another year or two because it lags the end of the build. But now it's all about what do we do and how do we leverage that network? How do we keep it up to date? So how do we go from hyperfiber to one day 25 gig, etc., or higher speed? That's probably out in the future. But also, how do we leverage that asset with other opportunities? So that's a lot of the work that we do at Chorus now is migrating from that phase of very successfully building and delivering that asset to leveraging it as much as we can, and then keeping up with demand, and then trying to see if we can push it out a bit further.
When do you imagine that copper will be gone from New Zealand as a country and entirely?
It's a really good question. I think in the fiber area, it's probably a few years out because everybody has an interest to do so. It's a little bit like when the television system switched from analog to digital. You do need a concerted industry and government approach to do so. So I think it will take a few years to figure out what that plan is, and then you'll have to execute on it. So I'm not going to put a number of years, but I think it will take longer than in the areas where there's fibers. But the writing is on the wall. It's a technology that has served us extraordinarily well. And as you said, from the 1800s, I would have said early 19th, so you beat me to it, 1800. I remember a couple of years ago being at a conference, and somebody who had created the technology between ADSL was a speaker, and he was asked the question, how long do you think copper is going to continue to be used to deliver broadband? He thought about it and he said, probably 5 to 10 years. And then he paused for 2 seconds and he said, but I've been saying this for the last 5 to 10 years. So I don't know, but the writing is on the wall. Yes, it's a technology that has served us well, but ultimately will need to be turned off. And we now have plenty of alternatives to actually deliver a better service to customers.
Great. Well, it's been fascinating to talk with you. Thanks so much, JB Rousselot. Really appreciate you taking the time out to chat and to share with our New Zealand Tech Podcast listeners.
Thank you. And let me just put one quick plug for all of my colleagues at Chorus, because that team does an amazing job every day, an amazing mahi. And I just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, well, very much the whole country benefits from hard work. It has a big flow on to New Zealand. It's very important for us to have great infrastructure, and Chorus plays a pretty key role in that picture. So, yeah. Thank you, JB. And, of course, a special thanks to our show partners, to Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology, and Deal. Thank you very much, JB.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. Cheers.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.